All right, welcome to another day of MERN. This is week 8, day 2, so our final recording for this cohort. We're going to be having some fun, but before we do that, I think we've got some questions that we wanted to ask real quick first.
Yeah, so the question I have is about Bootstrap.
Okay.
This is the first time I've actually used it.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, since React, when you use a class, in React you use class name instead of class. Does that mean that the classes they use for Bootstrap are class name instead?
That is correct.
Okay.
I'm
So
going
it'd be class name container, class name column, class name row.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. And so, in fact, actually, I'm going to show you how to use Bootstrap today. So, you guys ready for that?
Yeah.
Awesome. Any other questions that we wanted to get going?
This was ready for learning about Bootstrap yesterday.
Unfortunately, some questions have prompted an expansion on our lecture for today. So now there's two different ways to use Bootstrap, and I'm going to go ahead and use Bootstrap in our app today to simplify making things look okay and making them work nicely for us, because plain and simple, we want to know exactly what's going on, and we like things to look nicer without having to put in a ton of work. And so today we're going to just quickly add in some Bootstrap when we get started. And I've kind of prepped my information here so that I can be a part of this. Sorry, I forgot. I didn't even realize my video hasn't been on this whole time. All right. Well, you guys are probably appreciative of that, but it all works. So I've started off our project today just a little bit in advance, because I thought the less we have to type, the quicker we can get into the good stuff. I've included routing, but I haven't installed it yet. I just added the lines, and I've added a couple of links, and I've added my paths for the router. And then in addition to that, I've created a couple of different components here. Sorry, I'm looking at one thing, saying another. And these components, it's just very simple. I've got a counter and I've got a list. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to just start with my npm install. And as you guys know, @reach/router is going to give me the ability to use these links and the router functionality to follow different URLs. And then I'm going to do an npm install of Bootstrap. Now, Bootstrap, you guys may or may not have done much with it in the web fundamentals, because it was an optional thing. But Bootstrap is, in essence, just a fancy version of CSS. They've pre-built things, just like the libraries that we use in our React code, like Axios and useEffect and different things. These pieces that just enhance and simplify our lives are pre-built for us. Well, Bootstrap is very much the same in the fact that it has created common CSS classes for us, and we can take advantage of those. Now, to use this Bootstrap that I just installed, the trick to this is I have to import it just like the app.css that you see here. So I'm going to import. Now, first off, I have to recognize where I'm at in my folder structure, because right now the app.js is inside of my source folder. And that source folder is the same level as this node modules. Node modules is where all of my npm install stuff goes. And you can see we've got a ton of folders here. And if I scroll down, one of these is going to be, should be, where is, let's try this again. We'll look for it. I'm going to, after I refreshed it, where is my Bootstrap? Oh, I pooched it. I'm sorry. Okay. My node modules jumped because I was in the wrong folder. I'm going to delete that guy. I need to go back into my terminal and reinstall those. I apologize because I need to be in the right folder. npm install at reach/router and Bootstrap. I can put multiple things with just a space in between them, so it'll install all of them for me. And that's what I did. Instead of two different commands, I just put, I need these two, and it's going to do both of them for me. And that's going to put all of those folders inside of this node modules folder that I need for my React project. So I apologize for that. We'll get this updated here real quick. And then I can show you inside of our node modules that we should have a Bootstrap folder. Okay. This thing is bound and determined to make a liar of me right at the beginning. Wow. Okay, where is my Bootstrap? There it is. Okay, now I see my Bootstrap folder. Inside of Bootstrap, I'm going to have a distribution folder, a CSS folder, and here's my Bootstrap min.css. This is the one that I want to include. It's not very human readable. When they say .min in the middle of a file, you've probably seen this when looking at jQuery and different things where it's like, you're bringing in the sources equal to something .jQuery.min. And all of that min is saying is we took out all the spaces and the prettiness of it. We got rid of all the returns. We've kind of condensed things down so it all looks like this jumbled mess. And it makes it so that the file is smaller for transferring. Well, I have it right in my node modules. And so what I do is I have to go up one level, and then I can see my node modules. Node modules, Bootstrap /dist/css/ and there's my min.css. Once I've included this, at this point, I can use all of Bootstrap's features. The only difference, as was pointed out just a little bit ago by Chris, we need to come down here to where it's class name. This is where I define which classes apply to things. And inside of here, I can leave this app if I want, but I need to make sure that I always start my Bootstrap with a kind of like this container on the very outside that's going to control everything. And that container is going to now provide me with everything that I need to be able to utilize the Bootstrap. Now, if I don't have container, then parts of Bootstrap work and parts don't, and it's just kind of crazy. So just always make sure that you start with a container at one of your highest levels, and then things start to work a little bit better. Now, I'm going to make this a width of 75%. W dash is going to allow me to determine a percentage of the screen that gets used for the width of my div here. And then I can add margin. And so an M stands for margin. and I can do the numbers 1 through 5 for margin. And what it is you may or may not have run across this in CS where it says EM. Instead of PX for pixels, it's like EM. That is, it makes it proportional to the size of your font. Okay, so 1 EM is the same size as the space used for your font. But then it kind of, it's ratio, so it expands very quickly. And so I can do 1, which is actually pretty small. And then you could go up to 5, which is as large as you can make it with Bootstrap. And the reason that these things are all proportional and percentages instead of pixels is so that it can expand and contract based on the screen size. So I can make things look good on a cell phone just as much as I can take the 40-inch massive gamer's curved monitor and make it look nice there. So that's one of the main reasons for Bootstrap is these types of things. In those couple of words as a class, I've made it easier for me to now work with things. Now, having done that, I'm going to go ahead and add just a few more things here. So class name, and I'm going to give it an M-5 for this link and an M-5 for this link. What this is going to do is now it's going to provide me with, oops, wow, it didn't want to work that way for me, but I just pasted in the wrong spot. Okay, so by putting in this M-5, it's just going to space out my links from each other. I don't have to go in and do anything fancy with classes or try to add some inline style here anymore. I'm letting a library that I pulled in just start taking care of all these things for me, right? And so with that going there, I'm just going to start this up because we want to make sure everything is happy and everything is hunky-dory. Now, if you're like me and you don't like having to scroll all over the place when you accidentally opened node modules, here is a trick. Sorry, I'm going to let's see here. Come on. Sorry, it appears as though I've got myself running somewhere already. Not that one. Where is this guy running? Sorry. I've got some code running somewhere that I'm just not getting to close down. I apologize. Okay, maybe that's it. Let's try the npm start again. As it's going through that, because it takes just a second, if you accidentally expand something here in the left side of your code, and it's like monster sized, for example, like our node modules, if you click on something inside of it and use your left arrow key, it will jump you to the parent level. And then if I use my left arrow key again, it will collapse that. And I can use the right arrow key to expand. So if I come here to this just YAL list, and I use my left arrow key, it closes it. Left arrow key again, it jumps me to the top, and left arrow key again, it collapses. So I prefer using left arrow keys and right arrow keys when I get into something massively huge because I can jump around easier that way. So, all right. Now, with that running, I'm going to go back and look at my React app. Okay, so in here, I can see that I have got I've got links 2 links in here. Each one has got a margin around it by that yellow color. And I didn't have to do very much. My app also has a M-5, a margin of 5 that goes all the way around it. And you can see that I'm not going to use the whole space. So let's go ahead and look at app. And inside of our app, we've just got our links here, but we don't have any others. And that's partly because I have got, get my code back. I've got my router here. My router is going to wait until I see a specific path, and then I'm going to go to it. But those links, you'll notice they're outside of router. That makes it so that they can show up all the time. No matter what route I'm on, these things will show up. It's kind of similar to creating a header component and throwing it outside of this router. I could do these links inside of a header component, and that way they would all be consolidated into a component as well. So just something for you to be aware of. You can do this type of thing and make it so that those routes are available all the time. And so I can go to reducer count, shows my counter component. And you'll see here, I've got my counter component right down here at the bottom. And I've got my reducer list. And my reducer list has the list component. But no matter what, I've always got my links at the top. So that's just one of those things that I can do in order to quickly put in the things that I want for styling. Now, with those things in place, I can start playing around just a little bit with code and with my, I'm going to play around here with my useReducer. So let's see here. Dan is asking if we really need the .. node modules when importing Bootstrap. It does work for you to use the, it does allow you to do this. And you're right in this. If I make sure that the leading slash is gone, then by default, the React code will look in node modules for a Bootstrap folder. So that is another way of doing it. Absolutely. Typical is trying to do it this way because it's pointing to a specific file rather than a library. But having said that, both will work. So now Chris mentioned that typically Bootstrap is found in the head of an index file. That is absolutely correct. So if you wanted to, you can go over into the public folder, into the index.html, and here inside of head, I could copy in my links to the CDN, the Content Delivery Network. That's where you say, okay, go out to this site and grab the min.css for Bootstrap. That is totally good as well. It's just the less I touch the index.html, the more clear it is when people get into the application. There again, 6 of one, half dozen the other. There are people that will, they will swear up and down, you only put that into the index.html, and other people swear up and down, you only put it into node modules. And I laugh because they both have good arguments. So whatever you would like to do, both will work. I can install it and then it's on my computer. So while I'm developing, I always have it, whether I'm in airplane mode or not. If I'm using the CDN, then that can cause me some problems trying to program offline. And that's the main reason I go this route. Otherwise, 6 one, half dozen the other. Any other questions about our Bootstrap before we jump into use React? or sorry, useReducer. Yes, I can totally agree. Getting into index.html and changing the title, that is something that typically gets changed. So that's a great point. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, we're going to go in and we're going to talk about these things a lot as we go through the first example. And then we're going to jump into a more advanced example on useReducer. And I'm going to try to pull in another hook called useRef. useReducer and context in the same lecture, I'm afraid that they're a little too close and you'd end up getting things confused. So I'm going to go with useReducer because that one transfers directly over to a very common standard in the industry called Redux. Basically, the developers of React created this minimal version of Redux in React, so that you didn't have to worry about importing another library in order to use just the basic functionality of being able to work with complex objects to accomplish work. Now that's the main difference when I'm looking at useReducer versus useRef. All right, useReducer versus useState. And so I'm going to import useReducer just like I do the useState. Okay, and this useReducer is somewhat similar to useState, but it's going to require some different things. Okay, now you're going to notice the similarity between the way that I'm going to use useReducer is similar to me grabbing useState and putting an object in it. Because useState with an object, I can do a whole bunch of key value pairs and different things like that. But it's more than that. useState is typically tracking one piece of information. And as that piece of information changes, I'm just constantly replacing it. Okay? Sometimes I can do more fancy things, but every time I try to do something different with state, I have to create another function. This is a way of consolidating work into one place so that when I pass this reducer that's holding state down to a child or something, they get all the functionality, all of those functions that are a part of adjusting that state, they come with it. It makes it a nice, convenient little package. All right. So what we do is I'm going to start this very similar to state. And I'm going to say const, and I'm going to have an array. And here I'm going to give my state. I'm going to call it state for right now, just so that you guys can see it. And then I'm going to create a dispatch function. And I'm going to call it dispatch func because I don't like typing forever. And that's going to come from me using Reducer. Now useReducer, here is our little tooltip help, right? The useReducer has this reducer, and then it has initializer argument. Okay, the commas are separating things. And then there's a comma for an initializer. And so we can look at these things. Now, having said that, there are other ways of using Reducer. If I come down here and I click on the down arrow, I can see the different types of things that I can do with useReducer. It'll show me different parameters that I can put in. But the one thing that I can be guaranteed about is this colon tells me what comes back. And what comes back is any, which is my state, and dispatch without action. Okay, we'll walk through this. It's a little bit crazy. So it's just, trust me on this one. A standard way of doing this is inside of useReducer, you start with a callback function. That is referred to as the reducer. Okay, we're going to make it so that a whole bunch of different functions get shoved into one place and can work on the same state. All right. And so I'm going to say that I'm going to take state and action as my parameters into my anonymous callback function. All right. Now here, I'm going to have to return something. Whatever I return is the new value in state. Okay. So if I return state, it's going to return itself. It'll just keep setting itself. Okay. That's not going to do us any good, but just for the moment, I want you to kind of think about this. The other thing is if we remember, useReducer requires not only the reducer, but I also need an initializer. This is where my initial state value goes in. And I'm just going to make a counter where we can increment and decrement and different things like that. And my counter is just going to start off with a value of 0. Very simple state. It's just a number in state, right? And with this, I have the ability to now start working with state. I created a callback function, and in here, it's going to do all the work. The initial value comes after the comma. This is very similar to useEffect. You want to make sure you put that comma and an initial value. So now that I have my state, this is in a sense my getter. My dispatch function is in essence my setter, but it's a really fancy setter because I can tell it exactly what I want it to do. All right. Now, having said that, I need to come down and I need to create some buttons because these buttons are going to do some cool things. And so this button, I'm going to start off with a class name so that I can say, I want this one to have M for margin, L for left, and I'm going to use a 4. This isn't in pixels. This is, again, it's kind of based on the size of your screen on how much space it's going to give it. All right. It's the, or sorry, not the size of your screen, the size of your font, which oftentimes is based on the size of your screen. But technically it's the font. And I'm going to create an on-click event. Nothing too fancy here. I mean, admittedly, I've put in a class to use Bootstrap, but onClick is going to take an anonymous function. Now here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the dispatch function. Now, technically, if I want to, I can rename these things, and I will in just a second, but I'm leaving it as dispatch function so that you kind of know this one isn't just a setter. This is an entire function that I'm going to dispatch some work to it. Now, in here, I'm gonna send along just a simple string, right? And actually, instead of add, I'm going to do increment. Okay. Now, with that, the dispatch function is going to get past the increment action. And we're going to watch how that works in just a second here. So this button, we'll just say is increment. All right. So when someone clicks on this button, it calls this function. and it's passing in a single string value. Now this is where useReducer kind of slips into the middle and acts as middleware for us. It says, oh, you're calling this function. If you guys remember, when an event happens and you call your function, you automatically get E, the event, right? Or if you're going to go ahead and send in a parameter along with it, say like the ID of something, you would do E, comma, my ID. Similar to useReducer. I get, instead, in this case, I get state for free. I get the current value without having to do anything. So when I call my dispatch function, I only have to pass in the action portion. Okay. So here I can do this. I can say if my action is equal to increment, then I want to return state plus 1. The thing that I return becomes the new value to be put into state. So I've got that right here. Okay, good deal. Well, let's go down here and I'm going to create now just an H4 real quick, and I'm going to put my state in here so that it sits above my button, and it'll show me what state is right then and there. Okay, so let's go back to our React app. We click on our reducer count, and now I've got my counter, my reducer, which is technically state, of 0 is the value, and here I've got increment. Now in my hooks, this is where I find my useReducer because it's a hook. It says reducer and the current value is 0. When I click on increment, it's going to call my dispatch function. It's going to automatically give me my original value, and it's going to come into that if statement. And it's going to say, oh, we need to add 1. We'll set state with what it is plus 1, and we'll then re-render, because whenever state changes, it re-renders. And so I should be able to see as I click on this, it keeps incrementing. I know, it's kind of anticlimactic to see right now, but let's do a little bit more. Let's go ahead and duplicate this, and instead I'm going to say decrement. All right, now I need to have an action up here that matches it, so I could do an else if action is equal to decrement. Then I want to return state minus 1. All right, same thing, dispatch function. I just changed the action I'm sending in. So now I have an increment and a decrement. I'm still using the same piece of state, but I can do 2 different things now, depending on what button I click. Okay, I may have your interest piqued now. Ooh, same piece of state, different functionality. Maybe this reducer thing's kind of cool because I'm putting a whole bunch of functions into one dispatch function. A lot less code, Dan, that's absolutely right. Well, let's go ahead and have some fun with this. Let's go ahead and let's do some extra math. We'll call this one double. Does someone have a question?
Squaring it.
What was that?
You could square it.
Square it. I like that too. Let's do it. All right. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't really like this if else stuff because it's going to be a lot more typing than I want to do. So there is a special thing called a switch. Now, have you guys run across a switch before? A switch statement? Yes, no? Okay, switch case. All right, Christopher's seen it in other languages. This is a switch statement. This is part of the JavaScript language basics. It's nothing fancy about React. This is standard JavaScript, all right? And what you do is you say switch is the keyword, just like if or for. And then in parentheses, you're going to give it a value, a variable, okay? Now this variable gets compared with values inside of a case statement. In the case that the key equals this value, I want you to do the code that is listed right here, and then you can break. I can use break or return, but this example right here is saying break. And then it has a default, meaning, hey, your key didn't match up with any single value that we found. So what do you want us to do in the case that nothing matches? All right. And I could easily just do a break immediately or a return immediately. And that's what I'm going to do here. My switch statement is going to do exactly what we see in that tooltip help. The way we do it is parentheses, I say action. This is that string that I'm passing in to the dispatch function, right? And in here, I can say case, increment, colon, return. Return is going to set my new state value, right? And I'm going to say state plus 1 semicolon. Case, decrement, colon, return, state, -1. Case, let's get it here. We had double, colon, return, state times 2. Case. Do you see how much easier this is than the else if, else if, else if? I mean, this is pretty cool. Square, colon, return. And the easy way to do a square is state times state. Case, reset, colon, return, 0.
Even the coding looks more organized than having to do if else, where it gets carried way out.
Exactly. So now what I've done is I'm going to go ahead and actually move this guy up to where I have my commented code, so he's out of there. Because what I did is I replaced all this if, else if, return. Well, I've got now all 5 of my buttons doing work right here in one switch statement. So my state can take all sorts of different actions based on this special useReducer hook, right? So now I've got this useReducer that's capable of doing all these things if I've done it right. Now, that's not a lot of code to do 5 different buttons worth of work. But if I go back to my code, I can see that I can increment, I can decrement, I can double, I can square, and I can reset. And I can even go the opposite direction. I can go ahead and go all over the place with this thing. It's all using the exact same state. It's all using the one setter function. It's just reduced all that functionality down into one single place. And so now you ask yourself, okay, well, do I really need to ever pass state down to props? Well, not unless I need to view it. If my button that I'm working with is just going to modify things, all I have to do is pass in this dispatch function and tell it, this is the action I want you to dispatch, and boom, this functionality, the state, it's all passed down, and it just, useReducer automatically says, yeah, the state is this, that's where we're starting. So what do you guys think? You understand it? Complicated?
This makes more sense.
It's nice, isn't it? I mean, this is super cool stuff. But until you've played around with that state and really understand what is state doing here, man, introducing this extra level of, okay, now we're going to do all these different things with one piece of state, you're like, so this is a super cool thing, right? Now, we don't often work with just a single number or something like that. We typically get into things a little bit more complicated, all right? So now let's start thinking about some of the lists that we've done in the past, all right? In the lists that we've done in the past, we've had a little form, and inside of that form, we had to keep track of every single input, right? And then when those inputs changed, we had to update state, and we also had to go in and, you know, you'd add things to the list and you'd remove things from the list, and you had different functions. If you had to add it, you did this function. And if you removed it, it was this function. And if you changed something, it was this. And so you start thinking, okay, wait, maybe there's some tools that could make this a little bit easier. So we're going to have a little bit of fun by adding in yet one more hook. We've been using Reducer. Now we're going to use Ref. Okay, useRef is a really cool thing. What it does is it grabs a hold of a DOM node, an input box, for example, and it saves it off as an object into our React environment. And that React environment now can start referencing the value of that text box and everything without having to do like e.target.value. We can go and grab things from and adjust values in a DOM node like it's a variable inside of my React code. So this is really, really cool. And so let's go ahead and start off. I'm going to start by creating my useReducer because we already know that one. Const, and here I'm going to say this is my my list, and I'm going to say that this here is my dispatch list func. I'm being very verbose, okay? This is not the way you would typically name this variable, but it's very clear to anybody that comes in and looks at my code exactly what state this goes to and that it's my dispatch function. So we use reducer, and inside of my reducer, I'm going to take in the state and the action. State is automatically given to me. Action is the thing that I pass in to my dispatch. And here I'm going to do a switch statement, and I'm going to call my action. Inside of my action, I'm going to say this is a case statement, and I'm just going to say boo for right now. And it's going to return state. And then I'm going to do default. And it's going to return state. I keep indenting and I don't really need to. It's just a force of habit. It'll indent for me as soon as I put on that colon at the end of my case statement. It indents the next code so that I can see these are all my case statements in this row, and the work that they do is in the indented section. We make it look pretty, and VS Code makes it very easy on how I do that. Right? Now, before I get any further, like my use effect, I need to make sure that I have an initial value. Since I'm working with a list, I'm going to make it an array. So just like I would with use state, I'd set an initial value of an empty array. I'm doing the same with my list here on useReducer. Well, let's go down, and I'm going to need to create a form. All right? Because I need to be able to take in some input. And my form is going to have an onSubmit. We'll go ahead and say submit handler. And I need to create my submit handler. So let's do const submit handler equals, and I shouldn't have to take anything in to my anonymous function. And in my submit handler, let's do a this is where I'll call my dispatch. All right. And so let's do a dispatch list function. And in here, I have to send in a value, right? And so I can say boo as my dispatch. But I also need to make sure that since this is a submit button, I take in that E and I do an E.prevent default. You guys have probably all run into that mistake before, huh? So my submit is going to come in, it's going to prevent default, and then it's going to dispatch. It's going to use my dispatch function with the action of boo. And so down here, I've got this form. Now inside this form, I need to create an input of some sort. So I can say input and type as text, but I want to use ref instead. So I'm going to take out the type. I'm just going to say ref equals, and I have to set this equal to a useRef object. Okay, back up to the top. I'm going to create my useRef object. And to do that, I just go ahead with a const, and I can say text input ref equals useRef. Now, useRef has this option of nothing, which is what I'm going to do. Now, this returns a mutable. What does mutable mean?
Changeable.
Changeable, that's right. This one I can actually tweak. I can adjust it just by assigning new things to it. So I have a mutable reference to the object in the DOM. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave this guy empty. I could set it to something initially, but I'm going to allow this input ref right here to take over for me. All right. And all I have to do is I'm going to give it the input or the text input ref object right there. Now, by putting this inside of a form, what that allows me to do is actually just hit enter and it'll automatically submit the form. It's just kind of a shortcut. You don't technically have to have a button. That's just one of those, we put buttons on there for people that want them. But by default, we can have a form submit without a button just by hitting enter. All right. Well, with that in place, I want to come underneath my form and let's just make an unordered list. And here I'm going to map over my list. So up here, my state is list, and that is an array. So I can do list.map, right? And this map, we'll call it an item because it's just a list item. And I can bring in the index. Now that one, if we remember when we use map parentheses, I got caught on that earlier today. So my parentheses, because I'm returning a React element, and I'm going to make it a list item element. Now, my list item element has to have a key. And so I'm going to make that key equal to the index. And then inside of here, I'm going to say, item dot name, because I'm going to make this into an object actually. Item.name, because I want something a little more complicated. So for now, we'll just have an object that will display the item that gets typed in, right? And so when we submit this form, it goes up to my submit handler. We prevent default. The dispatch list function says, run the action boo from inside of my dispatch list function. So let's say that instead of state getting returned, we're going to return boo. Actually, let's do some concatenation. Ooh, that's what I'm talking about. State plus boo. I'm going to string concatenate here. See how many boos we can get going on this page. All right. So if I've done this right, it's going to come in and start grabbing boo. Ooh. Somebody see what I did wrong? What is the data type for state?
The empty array?
That's right, Andrew. It's an empty array. So I need to return an array. If I were to do this wrong, I would end up overriding my array with strings. But I want to make sure that I get a full array, and I'll go ahead and I'll spread out state as it is, and I'll add a new string to it, boo. Okay, so this is just going to take in the my list.
Default as well.
Well, date, it does require, well, okay, that's a great question. And The reason I,
An array, correct?
well, the thing is a state is already an array. So I don't have to put additional square brackets around this since it's already got some by itself. The only reason I need to up here is because I'm spreading out all the elements of the array. So I'm taking it, all those pieces outside of the square brackets when I spread it.
Essentially, it's a push.
Yeah. So it's just kind of like, hey, you know, you're keeping what you started with is my default. But Boo is going to allow me to do more. Now, this is, let's go ahead and look at it and see if it does what we want. We got the reducer list here, and I can type in things. Whoo! It didn't like that. List.map is not a function. Whoo-hoo. I messed something up. Well, should we look at it? I think we need to. So let's go ahead and we see that list.map is not a function. How does instructor Kevin start troubleshooting an error like this? List.map is not a function means that somehow my list is no longer an array. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to comment out this code because it's going to cause me to blow up. All right. And that allows me now to go back to my page. I can type something in and hit enter, and it does nothing, at least that I can see. But down here, I've got my list and I have my reducer, which says boo. So what is wrong with my boo? If I come in here and I do some more and I hit it again and again and again, it's adding boo to the array like I expected. Let's go look. Okay, so item, I don't have a name element. That's why. Okay, so if I think I've got it fixed, I'm going to come and uncomment my code and save it. And let's see.
Would you have to say item at, oh no, it's iterating through. You don't have to say item at position index. There you go. Okay. Yep,
that's right. So here it's, I've got this list item that's coming in, and item is just a string at this point because each element in here will be just one string. And here I've got it showing up now. I always hate these dots and stuff over here, but we'll worry about that in a while. Right now, I want to show you some cool things because more than just strings, we can start creating more complex things in here. So let's start looking at how do I create the values that I want to save. Well, first things first, I'm going to come here and I'm going to look at my submit handler and say, I want to be able to add to my list. And so I come up here, I need to change from boo, I need to change this to add, but now I want to be creating objects. I want an array of objects in the end here. So the way I do that is I break things out over different lines so it's easier for me to read, right? And I still spread out state and I create an object. Now this object I could have as a name. A name is going to take my, let's see here. I am going to take my text input ref, and I'm going to save off that information. Okay. And so I'm going to say, I'm going to actually make this into an object. This is where I want to make it an object. My dispatch function has the ability to be more than just a string. This is one of those where I want you to see the common way that this is done in the industry. When you dispatch, you usually use an object. The object, being an object, I can put whatever I want in there. But by default, the common naming convention, the common approach is you'll always have an action type. So when I dispatch, I'm going to include a type, and then I can include any other key value pair I want. And so name is what I'm going to want to put here. And so I'm going to create something that matches it just for my own personal sake. I can call this key whatever I want. But here I can do my text input ref dot current, which is referencing the current node in the DOM, dot value. So what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, I want to refer to this input element in the DOM, and the E is coming from my form. So technically, I don't have to have a separate state now for this input. I have a JavaScript React useRef object that gives me everything that I would need for this specific input. So you can see if I useRef for a first name and useRef for a last name, I can come in here on a handler, on a submit, and I can just grab those values. I didn't have to create separate state for each one, but that's an extra. Here we've got our object, which becomes our action in our dispatch function. And I've got my type inside of action, so I need to reference that key. Action.type is now going to show the add or whatever else I want, because I can create as many cases as I want. I can create as much functionality as I want. And then inside of name, I can say action.name So now I've created an object that has key value pairs, and I can start playing with those. And we have to return an array. So we first spread out all the objects that existed in state before. And now I'm adding one more to it. Now to do this, I'm going to need to come down here. Now my item is an object. And so item.name is what I'm going to need to reference when I go to print things out. Now my web page may have blown up on me because everything was, okay, I'm going to clear this so that everything is back to normal. My useReducer has no entries inside of it. My useRef hook is pointed to my input. And so if I type in clown and I hit enter, now I've got inside of my array, my reducer state, I have this name clown inside of an object at index 0. And I can say bus. And I can say Java it's updating my state using the dispatch function. All right, well, let's go ahead and do just a little bit more. Clowns on buses getting coffee. I like it. Perfect. I think that's good. We're done. No, just kidding. Let's go ahead and do a little bit more. We can take my text input ref and I can say .current .value equals empty string. That's the equivalent of having my input with a value equal to my state, but now I'm controlling it right here in my code. So let's look at it. Coffee. You'll notice that my input now is empty. Coffee got added just like we wanted. Okay, are we starting to see some power in the useRef and power in the useReducer? That's right, we can. So now we all know that we like to remove things from inside of our state as well. So let's create a button. We'll just put a button right next to this and we'll say button class name equals, and I'm going to do an ML for margin left -3 so that it has just a little bit of room next to it. And then I'm going to put this because I'm going to have a couple of things. We're going to do an on-click event. And in this on-click event, I'm going to actually dispatch again. Instead of using a function, I'm going to just call my dispatch directly here. Dispatch list function, and I have to give it an object. I have to have a key called type. It has to be a string because that's what I'm using my switch statement against. And with that type, I can now say remove. Well, you know, if I'm removing something, I probably have to have some sort of value to go along with it. And so let's call it the ID colon, we'll call it index. Now, let's see if we can do this. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Okay. So my button, I'm going to end my button there, and I'm going to say remove. Auto-corrected for me. How kind of it. Okay. So now this button should appear next to every single item. And this item, it'll show its name. And then the button is going to look for the index. I think I'm better off using name here, actually. Oops. We'll go ahead and say item.name here, so that we can remove something from the list based on the name of it. So I'm going to make this guy name so that it matches up better when I'm looking at my code. So my dispatch function is going to take in this object. The type is going to say which switch statement do I go to, and name is going to give me something that somewhat of a value for me to work with. All right. So up here, I'm going to come up and add in a case for remove. And I'm going to return. Now, how do I get rid of an element from an array?
Push, isn't it?
So push is one way we could add something to an array. Do you guys remember, similar to map, there was another one for getting rid of?
Filter.
filter. That's right. So state is currently an array, so I should be able to use filter right here. And state.filter is going to take in inside of the parentheses here, it's going to be a single item, right? And this is an anonymous function that has to return true or false. And so if I say that the item name.name is not equal to the action.name, then I should get back the everything except for that one item, right? So now did I added one too many curlies here, or sorry, parentheses.
Kevin, does that actually remove the item, or does that just remove it from the currently rendered list filtering?
So that's a great distinction there. This state.filter returns an array, and that brand new array that it returns, because state is immutable, I can't change it in place, right? The array that it returns is going to be anything that is true. Any element that matches this criteria is going to get added to that new array. And so as long as my item names don't match, it's going to be put into that new filter, or that new array that gets returned. And this return statement is then going to say, this is our new list. So let's do this. Const filtered item array is equal to all right, and then I can return the filtered item array. So I break it out into two lines just so it's a little bit easier to see how this works, right? Filter returns a filtered array without changing the original, which is a great distinction, Andrew. And then that new array I can return, and it gets put into state. It's listed now as this filtered version, right? So these are two very, very different things that I'm doing with arrays. They would definitely be different functions, but I can do it all with the same dispatch list function because I'm dealing with the exact same state, and I'm just passing in a different action. And since I can pass in additional information to the action, I can say everything that I want right here. So with this taken care of, let's see if I can go in and work with my page here. So each one of these got a remove button added to it through map. And if I come in and I click on remove for the bus, boom, it's gone. I didn't have to create separate functions. It's all captured into that useReducer. Booyah! I can put whatever I want in there now.
You do the same thing by putting in edit.
So I could do an edit. So let's go ahead and, just for grins and giggles, because I think that sounds like fun, let's go ahead and we will add a we'll do this one out here outside of the form. I'm going to say my edit input ref. So I have to create that up here. Okay. And then I don't want to make this too complicated. So
Sorry, Kevin, I just have a question about it.
Mhm.
If you're, actually, I was having this question, and it looks like, so when you're doing ref, that's for like one instance of state. So my question was, how do you do it for a form with multiple inputs? So do you have to then create a new ref object for each input field?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. That is a perfect point. Okay. And so here, let's do this. And what I'm going to do is I'm putting these into the same form so that when we submit handler, I'm going to clear out both of them. This is my edit input ref that'll get reset. And up here, I'm going to pass in edit as text in, or sorry, edit input ref dot current dot value. All right. And actually, wait. Okay. So,
Add a button.
well, I'm just trying to think here. If I modify this guy to take in E, and then my submit handler takes in a, no, I don't need to do that. Never mind. Okay. So if edit input ref dot current dot value is not equal to an empty string, then I'm going to do an edit. Else, I'm going to do an add. And so here I'm going to come in and say my add doesn't need the input, the edit input. The edit is going to use two values that I pass in. All right. And so in the event that I have an edit, we'll do case is edit. I'm going to return, I have to return a new array, right? And so I'm going to start by spreading my state so that I have all the original values. Let's see here. Just thinking through this as I go along.
Sorry.
It's all good. It's kind of fun to tackle something a little different. So let's see here. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a let new array equal an array. This is not going to be very elegant. Okay. So let's play around just a little bit here then.
Is there any way you could pass in the index position of the one you're trying to replace, and then say replace with replace that with the edit box at that position?
Now we're
That's kind of what I was thinking. If you have an edit box there, and then when you hit edit, then you pop up an input right behind it to type in what the edit is, and then submit it.
okay. I see what you're talking about. So how would I, because I can't necessarily, I can't easily add in a bunch of ref objects here. But what I could do is, if an edit button was pushed, I could handle that differently. So that's probably a better way of doing it. So if I do a const edit handler, and I take in E and then index, then I can do this down here. And I could also do this down here. Because now I can take in both of those and I can say index here. Hope I'm not losing you guys, but I'm just kind of chugging along here. So we've got our handler that's going to reset things, right? Our submit handler for adding an item. Our edit handler is going to pass in this edit. And so what I would do is I'm going to start by spreading state into my new array. And then I can say new array sub action, action dot index
equals the input that you put in the other box, right?
Edit, right? Is that sounding about right? So I'm going to take the action, oops, I almost forgot this just to be on the safe side. So because I technically don't need this input anymore, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take the edit input and put it in there. So action.index would get the index for that. And it's going to replace the value. And then I'm going to return state, or return new array. That's what I'm going to do. So by passing in the index and the new edit value, I can replace that. And then down here, we can duplicate this button. And we can say instead of remove, we'll do edit. And instead of dispatch function list, I'm going to call my edit handler. And it's going to take in my index. Is that sounding right, guys? So my edit handler takes in E and index, oops. So I need to have my E to pass in E as a parameter, or as an argument to my edit handler function. So E and index, I'm matching there now, right? And my edit handler is going to take and use the dispatch list function to edit. It's going to take in the value of my edit input and use the index into that array to change it. And then up here, I have the case statement for my action of edit. I create a copy that's now mutable. I edit the piece that I want, and then I put that new mutable array into state to become immutable. Okay. Everybody feeling like their head's spinning just a little bit? Let's see if it works. All right, so right now I've got two things in here that are not showing up right now. Now that may just be me needing to change some things. I'm going to add a class name here so they aren't sitting right next to each other. I'm going to do an ML-5. So what I'm doing is I'm just pushing the left side away from me, this input. All right. So now I've got these two sitting there. I've got things in my reducer that are not mapping. So list.map, I get my item.
You need a div, like a JSX fragment or whatever, for it to render. I don't know, that was an error I saw sometimes in the map.
Yeah, well, actually, that's a great question, is what's in my console, right? Okay. Edit handler is assigned a value but never used. New array is assigned a value but never used. Huh. I wonder why it's saying that. Line 1843. So 43. It's not looking right. These numbers and things aren't looking right. I'm going to hard refresh right now so that everything gets reset. When things aren't looking right, the first thing I do is I go to that. So I've got two ref inputs. And so I add in Billy. And I hit enter and it does nothing. Okay. Well then, let's come down to my form. And I'm just going to add a button, which is type equals submit. Click me.
You have the two inputs within that one form that has on submit handler, but the edit handlers in the mapped version. So if you put something into the edit box, how does it should be disconnected, right? The edit handler is just sending the index position, and then whatever's in the box is getting sent to the edit input ref piece of state. So it should circumnavigate actually having to be submitted by the form, right?
That is exactly right.
Okay, cool.
So what I'm counting on is that the button is going to be able to do things that weren't available to me before. And so here I'm going to add in a class name equal to, you guessed it, ML-5, so that I get some spacing between that button and my inputs. Okay. And we can say, let's see here. What did we want? Coffee and banana and chili. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to I'm going to go to my edit box here, and I'm going to say this one should be soup. And if I click on this edit button, if I'm doing it right, it should send in the index position of chili and replace it with the value soup. It did. It replaced it with soup. But what's wrong?
It's not an object.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's exactly it. My soup is not an object. Darn it. Okay. So let's see here. How do I fix it? When we add something, I pass in just a name.
It looks like it's being added as a string instead of an object,
That's right.
which is
So,
overriding.
which is overriding? That's right. Up here, the difference is, okay, I went in and I just did a replacement of that element, but you'll notice when I add, I have to create an object. So I need an object here as well with a name of key, a value of action.edit, because I have to put an object in place of this specific object. So let's try this again. Let's go ahead and we're going to remove that guy. Isn't that nice that our remove works so well? Then we're going to call it chili again. And chili's in there, and I'm going to call this one soup. We're going to hit edit. Boom! There we go. Thanks for helping me, guys. No soup objects for you.
Sorry for adding the complication.
Hey, you know, we learn together. I hate to say it, but sometimes getting me off script is some of the best way to learn, because some things I know right off the top of my head, and others I'm kind of like, let's figure it out.
Then I have another question.
Okay.
All right. So inside your switch statements,
Okay.
can you add functions inside of switch statements?
We could add entire functions, yeah.
Okay.
So-
Not that I'm trying to get you to do that. I was just a question, so that way I knew.
Yeah, I mean, it's something like this. You could do a const print me, right? And that one would take in a value, and we'll make that an anonymous function, and we'll just do console.log of value. And in here, I could say print me action.name. And if I go to add something, toys, and I look at my console, add that, there we go. I used a function that was outside of my reducer, but it's included.
So like as an example, or the reason I asked that is so that way, like you can put that in edit, where when you click the edit button, then it pops up an input box on that same index line of what you're trying to change, type in the thing, and then turn around and change it that way. Correct?
Yeah, you totally could.
Okay, I'm saying that just for like user friendliness. That's really where I was going with the whole edit thing, is I was thinking about the courses that we've been taking. So not that I
Well,
was trying to add any more complication.
let's see here. JS, JavaScript, what would we call that? Text input pop-up. Okay, so let's go look at these alert boxes. That's okay buttons. Window.prompt. Okay, we're gonna have some fun here. Okay, so my edit, instead of having...
guys, I wasn't.
I'm gonna have fun. Anyway, okay, so let's let's comment this guy out. And then come in here. I'm going to comment that guy out and this guy, because we're not going to use our input anymore. We're going to go in with edit and index. And here, I'm going to say, let new value equal, and it was called window.prompt. Oops. Window.prompt, right? And inside of window.prompt, it says, you know, here's your prompt, and then this is the default value, right? So I'm going to say, what do you want it to say? And then I say what it defaults to is my new array sub action dot index as my default value, right? So this is the original value of what it is.
Right.
Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to prompt them for what to say. I store that into new value, and now I do new value here. What do you think? Maybe?
Yeah. I according to what it was saying on the
Let's give it a try. Okay, so if I say soup needs to be, ooh, it gave me an object. So let's go ahead and cancel that guy. We nuked him.
over in the console log, line 5.9.
So, okay, so here, okay, action.index is giving me an object. I need the dot name from that object, right?
Yep.
Okay, let's see how that works. Let's edit the banana. Banana 15 or 35, there we go. And it's going through twice. I wonder why it's trying to do that twice. Ooh. Okay, so that should halt the continuing work. Let's do a console.log of new value. Oopsie, value, just to see what it is, because we should find that that turns it into an object. So this is putting it in the right spot. This is the right prompt. We've got the new value saved. We put the new value into an object with a key value of name. That object is then assigned to the location where our old object was supposed to be. And then we set new array. All right. Well, what I'm going to, oh, go ahead.
Wouldn't if you go back for a second, wouldn't the new array action dot index dot name equal name would be the new value, or is it the whole index?
Well, you could do it that way too. This way that I'm doing it is replacing the entire object, but if you wanted to, you could very, very truthfully, you could do that.
But now it still needs to be, it still has to be passed as an object, correct?
Well, the thing is by using .name, I'm reaching into the object,
right,
and replacing the piece inside of the object. So the entire object is still intact when I start, or when I modify this and it's done. So that's That's possible. Let's see here. I'm going to control refresh here so that I start off clean. And we say, ooh, it's going through twice. I don't like twice. Cow, milk, chocolate. Okay.
So it only did it twice on the first one.
I wonder if I accidentally tapped enter twice.
Or did you not default?
So e.prevent default.
Yep.
So, okay. So let's edit the milk and make it chocolate milk. Okay, so it set this, or at least it printed it out on line 25, right? So 25 up here gave me a new value, but my array didn't change. Index name gives me a new value. The new value is what I expect, chocolate milk. And if I look at my components, let's look at the reducers. Okay, so it made it to chalk, right? I wonder why it's doing it twice though. And it doesn't change it the first time through, it's the second time through. Some of the fun. Okay, well, I've sidetracked this long enough, I apologize.
That was my fault.
I can figure it out and let you guys know. But, you know, when it gets to some of these screwy things, I'm going to have to go and look through things. And it's getting about to the witching hour where I have to take off. And I can't go down this rabbit hole right now. I apologize. I wish I could, because right now it's just eating me up inside. I'm just like, oh, I want to figure it out. So it's not going to be until I get back that I'm going to be like, okay, now I sit down and I look through it and go, oh, that's what it is. But hopefully I've created enough of an experience here for you to see that you can really get creative, because as long as I pass in this useReducer function, I can do a whole bunch of things, and I didn't have to send everything down through props one at a time. Here's this method, and here's this method, and here's this method, right? It just comes along for free. And this state is matched up. It's married with this dispatch function, because it automatically gives me the current value of state no matter what. So all the things.
Basically, it's like combining multiple components into one component.
In a sense, it is. It's creating multiple functionalities. I like to think of it here as a method is something you do. It's an action, right?
Right.
And so what I've done is I've taken a whole bunch of actions, a whole bunch of methods, and shoved them together. And basically each case is a unique method. And so if I were to, if I were to pass this information along to another component, it can do everything that dispatch can do. And so it's not, oh, I need to be able to add on this one and I need to edit. So I need to pass in all these different things. Here's my state, here's my set state, here's my add method, here's my edit method. It's, here's my dispatch. And if you need to show something, here's the original list.
In essence, you really just you're turning state into a variable.
It is.
You're turning it mutable.
Yeah,
by using the switch in the case. So now it functions in all these different ways instead of just only having the one function if you use state.
that's right. And so in a sense, my return statement is the equivalent of set state.
Right.
But I can do a whole bunch of things. I can do a whole bunch of things with it before I set state. And all that functionality is, yep.
Basically all it is that you took state, and with being able to change state before you send it to it, that when you send it to it, now it's reading state as the variable to create the method versus, that you're just passing information through use state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because use state, I can set it, but I have to do all my logic and everything outside of it. And so this just, it packages it all up and says, hey, you can do all you want with this state. You can have as many switch case statements as you want. You can do nothing. You can do crazy things. You could reset it if you wanted. You can, you can do string concatenation with one, and you can do multiplication with the other, and it's all with the same state variable. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so are there any other questions about this? useReducer and useRef are two really cool things. They're both hooks that are available. There's a whole lot of hooks that you can play with, but I've really come to love the useReducer and useRef personally. Yes, you can definitely use the npx kill port in order to reclaim your port if it's being used by another process. I always like finding which process is running though and going, okay, am I in the middle of something over there? But yes, Dan was pointing out here, we can use the npx space kill dash port space and then the port number to stop whatever process is using that port. So then you can start it up again. So, all right. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here. We're going to have some fun at other times, but am I still sharing my screen? Oh, wow. My meeting controls ended up in a funky place. All right, there we go. Now I'm stopping.